This is fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently. That's okay. Things are gonna be okay.
Disney are an empire in decline. With several of the entertainment industry's largest IPs at their disposal, they have at times dominated the film industry, whether it was their incredible animation feats from Snow White to Toy Story, their own IPs or IPs they've acquired. Disney have been at the top for a long time, creating quality and also questionable content that has them essentially dictating the film industry's direction. Whether it's the MCU, Star Wars, Pixar, streaming services, even their theme parks, they seemingly have their finger in just about every pie and in the process became a juggernaut of entertainment. Well, that's kind of how it used to be, and as you've seen the title of this video, it's not exactly going to come as a shock that I'm not here to praise Disney's rise to the top. Because in the last decade, the last 5 years or so specifically, Disney have fallen off to a degree that now in 2023 has them admitting publicly their struggles. But what's worse on their part is that this is something fans saw coming a mile away, yet Disney in their own stubborn ways chose not to listen and are now facing the consequences. If you take a look at just about every single thing Disney owns in the entertainment space, you'll notice a decline. The MCU isn't what it used to be. Star Wars has somehow become completely dead. Indiana Jones just became one of the biggest box office flops in history. New Pixar releases are having historically low openings. Disney Plus is arguably the worst streaming service. And then throw on top of that their preference to engage in out-of-place social commentary instead of telling a good story, souring fans across the board. And even their theme park numbers are on the decline. I could go on. And obviously, given that I'm doing this video, I'm gonna do that. I've been working away at this video for a few months now, just doing little bits and pieces here and there, and I thought at some point I'd have to eat my own words and scrap the video as things might have got back on track. But it's kind of been the opposite. Things have just gotten worse, and it doesn't look like it's getting any better anytime soon. So this is why Disney is falling apart. So as stated earlier, to say Disney are on a decline would be an understatement, and it doesn't bring me pleasure to say that, as I'm sure all of us at some point have been endlessly entertained by Disney related products, more so when we were younger, but Disney have always had something there for the big kids as well. But the proof of Disney's decline, it's in the pudding. Disney's top 17 highest grossing films of all time came out between 2010 and 2019. Now, this would signal strength at the box office for Disney, and sure it does, but it also highlights how quickly things have dropped off. Since 2019, it's been pretty much all red, with flop after flop after flop, with mild successes occasionally. Now, yes, you can attribute that to the pandemic, but as Top Gun Maverick, Super Mario, and even recently Barbie have proven, films can still clean up at the box office post-pandemic, which is exactly what Disney used to do. In a post-pandemic world, viewers aren't going to just come out in droves for bad movies like they did pre-pandemic. You need to earn the moviegoer's ticket way more than you used to. Now, does this mean bad films aren't still successful in some ways? Absolutely not. But again, you need to earn the moviegoer's ticket way more today than you used to. Like The Rise of Skywalker made $1 billion for Christ's sake.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
And this very logic is completely exposing Disney. The MCU's financial returns, which has been their biggest juggernaut for quite some time, whilst not completely terrible, have declined. Star Wars hasn't had a box office presence for nearly 5 years, but don't worry, we'll get to Star Wars later. And then there's their latest Pixar films. They haven't had a massive hit worthy of the name for nearly 5 years, and Indiana Jones 5 is somehow going to lose money. And to top it off, their parks are on the decline as well. Disney's downward trend simply cannot be disputed, although I'm sure many will try. But this isn't even taking into account that Disney Plus is pretty much losing money, and their exclusive series are being watched by fewer and fewer people as time goes by. It really is not a happy time over at the Mouse House, but let's put the magnifying glass on the specifics that are on the decline under Disney. The first being one of the biggest. Star Wars. Remember that name when it meant something? Star Wars has catapulted to the realms of complete irrelevance in the past few years. Now, if you don't believe me, let's just take a look at Google Trends. Star Wars is currently less relevant than it was in 2007. Yes, you heard that correct. Star Wars was more relevant in the mid to late 2000s when there was nothing happening for the brand, and it was essentially sitting in post-prequel purgatory. It's actually impressive how Disney have driven this IP into the ground. Basically to the point that people just don't care about it anymore. The Star Wars name is not what it once was, whether you like it or not. I remember 5 years ago seeing videos and articles being posted that Disney had ruined Star Wars, Disney had killed Star Wars, and I used to just sit there and laugh at it, as it's such a ridiculous claim. Because Star Wars can't die, it's just too big to fail. It's one of the biggest entertainment IPs in the history of the human race. But 5 years later in 2023, they genuinely have killed this IP. Star Wars is less relevant today with shows like The Mandalorian just finishing its 3rd season and Ahsoka on the horizon than it was when there was literally nothing happening for this IP. At best, a couple video games and some comics, yet it was still more relevant in that time than under Disney's control in 2023 with $100+ million shows hitting our screens. Star Wars was just at its peak around The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, in a relevant sense anyway. Star Wars was back, people were excited, fan theories were everywhere, and the money was coming in left, right, and center. And before The Last Jedi had even come out, Disney had pretty much already made back the $4 billion the IP cost them in the first place. But in that time period, something changed, and The Last Jedi was basically the catalyst for that change. Now, yes, I understand The Last Jedi has its admirers, but this was the time where the decline of Star Wars happened under Disney. There's simply no disputing it. It made $1.4 billion at the box office, sure, but it derailed a promising trilogy in that process and is responsible for the abomination that was The Rise of Skywalker.
We remember, so you don't forget.
Marvel used Secret Invasion to desecrate Tony Stark's final moments. They let She-Hulk make a mockery of everything you once loved about the MCU. They made Thor fat and then dumb. And worst of all, they let real-life agenda and pandering into their storytelling. This is going to be a look at how Marvel went from something truly special to a baffling knockoff crystal late-night fries dipped in water multiverse of stupidity.
Infinity Stones? Some of the guys use them as paperweights.
You think this is over? Come on, let's go! I smash fourth walls and bad endings. And sometimes Matt Murdock.
It is impossible to talk about the downfall of Disney without focusing on the biggest problem with the Walt Disney Company, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And this is part 4 of my final installment in my series about why Disney is failing. Because we are witnessing the greatest fumble in the history of entertainment. Because Marvel was a cultural phenomenon that many of us loved and still want to love.
But what is grief, if not love? Persevering.
Because I want nothing more than Marvel to fix what is broken, for redemption, for the brand that I grew up with. My favorite movie experiences are all related to Marvel, but these days, hoping in Marvel is a mistake, because this is what we get from Marvel these days.
I'm not a monster, Steven. I'm a mother.
Sorry we've been fighting lately.
It's never too late to stop being a dick.
Holding thousands of people hostage.
And it could have been thousands more if she hadn't put up her own quarantine.
And that's just a glimpse, a small taste of the trash that Marvel has been giving us in the multiverse saga. The term used to describe the phases of Marvel that have done destruction to one of the most profitable brands in history. But this isn't going to be a vague breakdown video on what's going on. We are going to do a deep dive all about Marvel, comparing the past to the present and looking at the future of Marvel projects coming out to ask ourselves, is there any reason to have hope?
You know hope is a mistake. If you can't fix what's broken, you'll go insane.
Starting out, we've got to show some love to the movies that paved the way, like the Blade movies, which are apparently getting remade, but hopefully that won't even happen at this point because all the stories coming out of the production, it sounds like a nightmare. We also have to pay some respect to those early Spider-Man movies. I don't know anyone who didn't love Spider-Man 2. Easily one of the best superhero movies ever made. The primary reason that the No Way Home movie works so well is those early Spider-Man movies and their villains. I don't care what anyone says. William Dafoe is the man.
I'm something of a scientist myself.
And of course, the early X-Men movies gave us legendary actors. And regardless of the stories they used in those movies and some of the effects, it was always great seeing Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, alongside Sir Ian McKellen as Magneto, and Sir Patrick Stewart as Xavier. These days, the Multiverse Saga can't manage to cast anyone serious. Instead, they fill their projects with comedians and activists.
Yes.
All of those early superhero movies came first. They walked so that the Infinity Saga could run. And on May 2nd, 2008, everything changed when Robert Downey Jr. became Iron Man.
I am Iron Man.
It didn't take long for the character of Iron Man to show the world a glimpse of what could be. The charisma of a character that would lead to billions of dollars in profits, not only in the movie theaters, but in toy and merchandise sales as well. How much money did She-Hulk make again? What about Secret Invasion? The Eternals?
In terms of money, we have no money.
Iron Man wasn't about the villains either. It was about Tony Stark, his journey. And that's always been the case with these Iron Man movies. The second and third movies are not the greatest to be sure, but Robert Downey Jr. was always awesome. And that first Iron Man movie laid the groundwork for the rest of the Infinity Saga. Not to mention introducing us to Black Widow, played by Scarlett Johansson, one of the best characters in all of Marvel, an original Avenger. She immediately captivated the hearts of thousands of us, especially the Bone Bridger. That was the sort of woman I liked growing up.
That sucks.
These days, Marvel wants you to like this. Just another reason things have gotten dumb over the past few years. But Marvel wasn't always this way. The focus of storytelling wasn't to use Marvel's popularity to insert goofy modern politics or moments that don't make sense. Those original movies didn't care about that. Marvel was once focused on building something truly special, a connected universe that everyone wanted to see, with movies that you couldn't skip, giving us reasons to like and cheer for our superheroes. These days, you literally get called terrible names and labeled things for daring to say that our superheroes should be likable, especially if you dare to question our queen of all Marvel shills, Captain Marvel.
I'm only human.
But phase 1 of Marvel was far from perfect, don't get me wrong. The Incredible Hulk movie ended up being a bit of a sideshow, and eventually we got a whole different version of the Hulk, which might be the reason Kevin Feige was put in charge of Marvel. After those first two movies, he became the sole producer on pretty much every project that doesn't have Sony attached. And those Sony movies are 75% Sony anyway. But Kevin Feige no longer sharing equal credit with anyone on the producer column? Well, that means that we got to give Kevin Feige some credit, but we're also going to give him the criticism in this video for the way things are. The Multiverse Saga is Kevin Feige's fault. But don't worry, I'm still going to give him the credit, but we have to question, is he the right man for the job now? Sure, Kevin Feige was the right man then, it seems. I can't argue with the results of the first 3 phases of Marvel, regardless of how much credit he actually deserves. He was in charge and it went pretty well, but that doesn't mean he's the right man for the job right now.
Not likely.
But let's start with the good. In 2011, we got 2 more Avengers. Captain America: The First Avenger, that was a really solid movie. In fact, a lot of people go back to this one just because of how well it establishes Chris Evans as Captain America, an actor that many people doubted for the role. In fact, Iron Man 1 and Captain America set up everything we really need to know about these 2 heroes that paved the way for their epic finale, how their fates intertwined, and who they really were on the inside. It also allowed for incredible conflict between the 2 leaders of the Avengers that we see play out in multiple movies. That was necessary for the Civil War movie to be as good as it was.
Did you know?
Of course, the first Thor movie introduced us to Chris Hemsworth, who literally looked like Thor. The dude is a monster of a human being, physically intimidating in stature, but he's also a pretty talented and really likable actor. And now he's a huge movie star because of Thor. Phase 1 was all about building up the Avengers.
That's what we call ourselves, sort of like a team.
And their first movie came out in 2012. Those relatively smaller films all came together and made a huge splash at the box office, and the Avengers movie was incredibly popular. It introduced us to Hulk in an absolutely great scene that shows us the dangers of the Hulk before we ever see him in the green, but also allows Black Widow a moment that made me love her character forever. She's actually afraid in this scene. That's great acting.
Well done.
Scarlett Johansson will always be one of my favorite Avengers for her portrayal of Black Widow, and for some reason she always gets overlooked and bashed by modern day Twitter keyboard warriors that don't like her as an Avenger. They don't like what she represents for women. And of course, nowadays they won't cast anyone like her for obvious reasons. They don't like to see these types of actors or actresses anymore, too manly and muscular or too womanly and attractive. Modern day Twitter trolls have caused this agenda to get really dumb. But it's not surprising when you take a look at the writer rooms, like the one for She-Hulk.
Weird.
Following the success of that Avengers movie, we got 2 more movies that made good money, but are often considered the worst movies in the first 3 phases of Marvel. And I have to agree, Thor: Dark World was a mess, and Iron Man 3 introduced crazy problems that Marvel rightfully chose to just overlook and never come back to. Also, Shane Black was involved in Iron Man 3, that along with that new Predator movie. I have some serious questions for him.
What are you doing?
But of course, these days Marvel is making the same mistakes except worse, like with Secret Invasion. Unlimited powers where you can do anything, you can change the course of history, you can go back in time. And that's because there's no story control these days. And that is Kevin Feige's fault. But in 2014, everything changed for Marvel. They began to dominate in spectacular fashion. Captain America and the Winter Soldier is to this day one of the best Marvel films. A serious film with good and evil, right and wrong.
But we did it so that people could be free. This isn't freedom. This is fear.
The good guys versus the bad guys, trying to figure out who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. Nick Fury before he was making out with green aliens. The introduction of Sam, who would become Falcon. Steve Rogers getting this new friend while trying to save his old friend Bucky. And after that movie, we got the first Guardians of the Galaxy film in the same year. With an awesome blend of comedy and serious moments, the movie made Chris Pratt a superstar and showed the world a different side of Batista, who has gone on to be a pretty good actor. The movie also did a really good job of setting up the main enemy of the Infinity Saga, Thanos, a great preview of what was to come, and also established the Infinity Stones by highlighting how powerful and important they would be going forward. But don't worry, Loki Season 1 will ruin all that.
Infinity Stones?
Yeah, some of the guys use them as paperweights.
But in 2014, it was a great year to be a Marvel fan. It's too bad that the Guardians of the Galaxy are seemingly gone from Marvel, and their director James Gunn is now at DC. The whole multiverse saga has worked quickly to undo as much as the past as possible, because modern Marvel doesn't seem to understand that they are truly doing brand damage by destroying themes, characters, and concepts, changing the past. Fans loved all that, and they won't forgive quickly. In fact, fans may never forgive Marvel for what they've done in the last 2 years.
What's about sending a message?
In 2015, though, Marvel brought us the sequel to The Avengers, The Age of Ultron, a movie that did really good at the box office. But some fans were mixed on this movie. I must admit that I didn't love the movie at first, but it has really grown on me over time. And the movie definitely had moments that set up the future of Marvel, but it also did a pretty good job of developing characters and bringing in new ones, making
I like to make men uncomfortable. I enjoy making men uncomfortable.
For me, what I'm proud of is that it's normalizing something that should have been normalized a long time ago. It's not a crazy concept to me that women can lead giant franchises and make money for corporations. It's fine.
How Rey beat Kylo Ren.
Why is that so hard for people to get? Like, she's super strong and he's like so weak.
How do we get more women to make more movies? The women need to direct the movies, at least 50%, if not more. I agree.
I love women direct. I'm a feminist, by the way.
Hey guys, let's talk about how Hollywood seems to genuinely hate men nowadays. On this channel, I've made it no secret that I am not a fan of the obvious feminist propaganda that seems to be part of almost every single TV show and film nowadays. And in response to that, I've gotten some comments saying, Lauren, what's wrong with feminism? What's wrong with entertainment pushing a pro-female empowerment message? And to that, I have to say there's nothing wrong with female empowerment or being pro-woman, but the problem I have with the brand of feminism that Hollywood seems to be a fan of is that it's not just pro-woman, it's actively anti-man. And those are two very different things. I think most reasonable people of either gender will agree that you don't need to tear one gender down in order to lift up the other. But tearing men down seems to be basically all Hollywood does nowadays. Lauren, what do you mean by that? Do you have any examples you could maybe show us? Well, I'm glad you asked, hypothetical viewer, because yes, I actually do. I have some notes here. So the first and I think most notable way that Hollywood tears down men nowadays is by having weak and sidelined male characters. We are living, it's no secret, in an era devoid of creativity, and as such, Hollywood increasingly relies on things like reboots and remakes. Basically, it seems like every studio out there nowadays is trying to revive their now dead but once popular franchises, and a lot of these franchises happen to have male leads. We're talking about Indiana Jones, Star Wars, Star Trek, heck, Marvel, the list goes on. But what's notable is that in 98% of these reboots and remakes, even if the male characters of the original properties were initially competent, strong leaders. In the modern iterations of these franchises, they are more often than not relegated to the role of bumbling, incompetent nincompoop. Or at the very least, they are portrayed as less than their female counterparts. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is probably the most recent notable example of this. Indiana Jones historically, in his original films, was portrayed as strong, as smart, intelligent. And not only that, but also morally upright. He had grit, he had determination. But fast forward to Dial of Destiny, and instead we see the once great Dr. Jones as easily overshadowed by his goddaughter of Phoebe Waller-Bridges. I'm not bothering to look up her character's name in the film because odds are you guys have forgotten it too. And in addition to not being as smart as Waller-Bridges, we also see that Dr. Jones has now just lost his zest for life. He wants to give up. He is completely demoralized. Is that the man we once saw in Raiders of the Lost Ark? I don't think so. Hashtag not my Dr. Jones. And that brings us to another example of a male lead who in the 2020s, writers have just decided that actually they kind of suck, and that's Obi-Wan Kenobi from Star Wars. In the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, Obi-Wan Kenobi was presented as wise, sage, a master Jedi and a mentor who I think a lot of fans wished had gotten more screen time dedicated to him. And so when Disney Plus announced that Obi-Wan Kenobi would be getting his own series on the streaming platform, so many people were excited, especially considering that Ewan McGregor, who portrayed him in the prequel series, would be returning. However, the version of Obi-Wan they got in that show was very different to how fans had previously seen him. And actually, it has been argued that the show shouldn't have been called Obi-Wan in the first place when really the main character is arguably not him, but one of the female characters like Little Leia or that the black girl. That's racist! Again, I do not care enough to look up her name. And we're going to be talking more about Hollywood's hatred for men, but first I do want to say a big thank you to today's sponsor, Bouqs. Valentine's Day is coming up, and if you're still looking for flowers to send to that special someone, then I highly recommend you check out Bouqs. And what's really cool is that I've got you covered with 25% off your entire purchase at the Bouqs company, and that's Bouqs, short for bouquets. You see, Bouqs is my go-to flower source, and here's why. Their flowers are cut fresh and sourced directly from some of the best flower farms on the planet, including, by the way, this is really cool, even farms on the side of a volcano, so they stay fresh way longer. And what I love about Bouqs is that it's so easy. You can buy roses in just one click or choose one of their unique modern designs that you can't find anywhere else, including their 100 red roses that I'm sure you've heard about. Valentine's Day is February 14th, by the way, so coming up really fast. I already placed my order early and picked my delivery date, so don't believe it when she says, oh, you don't need to get me anything. Go ahead, get her something. Show her that you care. Surprise her with some flowers, something a little nice. Be the hero and go to Bouqs.com and use the promo code Lauren for 25% off. Again, that's BOUQS.com with the promo code Lauren. Bouqs with the promo code Lauren. And now, I'm not a huge fan of Star Trek, I will admit it, but from what I understand watching videos about the series, it's a similar situation with the show Picard. I'm not going to attempt to portray myself as any type of authority when it comes to Picard or any of the shows that character has been in, but from what I understand, in the 2020 series, that character has also gone through through a redesign to make him bitter, angry, and less competent so that his younger and more female and diverse characters can outshine him. And I mean, really, this disrespect toward male characters, it's a pattern that once you start noticing it, you really can't stop. Which brings us to The Witcher, which is a similar story, but a little different. Even though The Witcher was a very popular and established franchise in terms of the gaming industry and, of course, the books, until Netflix chose to adapt it, it had never been seen as a TV show. You know what? After the first season was released, a lot of people, myself included, were kind of pleasantly optimistic. Was it a perfect show? No, but it was pretty good. However, then the second season happened, and inevitably the third season, and eventually it became clear that the people involved with the show, the showrunners, the writers, they weren't actually interested in having a series focused on The Witcher. They were instead interested in telling the stories of female characters, like Ciri, like Yennefer. And so if you watch those later seasons of The Witcher, what you essentially see is that even though Geralt isn't necessarily portrayed as incompetent or weak, he ultimately is put in a position where he is relegated to supporting character in his own series. I mean, there was Ryan Gosling's portrayal of Ken in the Barbie film, which even though I thought he did a really fun job with that role, let's face it, the whole point of Ken is to present a male character who is useless but simultaneously entitled and patriarchal and controlling. We also have the He-Man show that Netflix put out, which I debated even including here because I'm not a He-Man fan, but I've heard from fans of the original show that he was definitely done dirty in this reboot. It was basically an excuse once more to focus on a female character from the original franchise while using the popularity of the male character. The male character who, by the way, doesn't even end up being the focus of the show. And it's not just reboots and remakes that have these male characters who really only exist to be stupid or useless or controlling or to make the female characters look better. Let's look at some of Disney's latest original films as an example. We've got Strange World and Elemental. In Strange World, for male characters, we have the toxic grandfather, the beta male father, or the, yes, gay son. Great role models there, shining masculinity, and in Elemental, the male lead is, oh yeah, crying 95% of the time. Look, there's nothing wrong with female leads, don't get me wrong, but it's just kind of weird when they happen in franchises that were previously led by males. And yes, not all male characters need to be strong or good leaders or super smart and capable, but we've gotten to a point